Our next cell is religion. Okay, we have various topics, as you'll see from the PowerPoint, Eastern versus Western, so your book gives you a good smattering of both. We're focusing mostly on Western. If we can get into Eastern, we will. The main issue with religion has to do with the onset of the Judeo-Christian tradition, which was a revealed religion. And some people, of course, went that way. They accepted the religion, and I'm talking about the ancient Greeks. Some did not. Those who did not are following Aristotle, and they are who we stem from. Okay, so those following Aristotle ultimately won over a 1400-year period. Didn't make the religion go away, okay, but put it in second place. So our religious scholars that you have in your book, you have the main ones are St. Augustine, St. Anselm, St. Aquinas, so 3 with A's in there, St. Anselm, St. Augustine, and St. Aquinas, and then the Reverend Paley later on. All of these people are trying to win us back over to believe in God first and put everything else second. So that's the job of our religious scholars. Okay, the Aristotelians just simply weren't going to buy into this revealed religion for many reasons, which we'll get into. But that's the job of our Western religious scholars. Religious problems is some of the issues that these scholars are hitting on here to try to convince us that God does indeed exist. And so some of these problems have to do with the case of miracles, God's powers, how can you create something out of void? That just doesn't seem logical. An all-knowing God, and so on. So, how can God be everywhere? And so these are the questions. We do have some things that seem to run automatically that you don't need a God there, like evolution or electricity or starting your car. These things seem to go on their own once you get them going. Now that doesn't mean that God couldn't also be there, right? Maybe God's watching your car run at the same time that it's going. Who's to say? So there are religious problems, and like I said, mostly the Judeo-Christian tradition is the one that takes the pounding. This belief in this particular God that makes himself known when, why now instead of not prior, and so on, is just the case. And so the Bible is written in the same tradition as the way the Greeks used to write. Islam does not fit this same profile. The Bible is written, the Old Testament, New Testament, in the way that the Greeks used to write, was that you put everything all in one book. Okay, this is what you get with Plato's Republic, and then it's given to you to study. So that's why you study the Bible, to be able to apply it. It all comes as one book. Notice we get the beginning, and then we even get the end. Okay, so, and that's pretty good, so considering that the end hasn't happened yet, but we get the end anyway. And so that's what you're studying for, okay, and that's what you prepare for. So you can cover the texts as well. You can cover individuals, books of the text, or individual psalms that are given. You can cover individual people, how do they relate, and so on. Or you can do comparative religions. You can study what one religion, even in the Eastern area, would look the same as the Western area. Don't forget that we do have various cultures in the Western tradition, such as the Native Americans. Some did believe in Christ, accepted Christ. Others had their own Native American gods that they believed in as well, that were very naturalistic. So there are various perspectives that you can take. Unfortunately, the Western tradition rarely goes south of the border, south of the equator. Those are various different types of individuals. Unfortunately, this text as well does not cover too many people like Ortega y Gasset and so on, who are also writing the same time, not the same time period, but in the 20th century, that covers some of these issues. I guess there's only so many people you can put into a textbook. But you can cover various texts and various philosophers' positions on those texts, or just cover the texts themselves. They're nice, and you learn a lot of lessons from them. Whether you use them or not, it's up to you. Okay, free will. But that's what religion is going to cover. Okay, so when you get your textbooks, when you get your discs for the videos, or if you stream it online, it's going to be covering Aquinas and Anselm, the powers of God, and so on. Again, it all focuses on this Western tradition, Judeo-Christian God, who seems to take the most pounding out of anything. Even Islam can't get over this revealed God here, causing quite a stir. Right? So this must be a big God here that we're dealing with. And it's just very difficult to comprehend and be able to put in a nutshell, and that's how that God has survived. It just can't be encapsulated into a thought and dismissed. Okay? So very interesting perspectives on that. Western philosophy in general is divided into two parts. Okay, I mentioned the pre-Socratics, those who come before Socrates. They start in 600 BC through 399 BC, the death of Socrates. And then Socrates is going to take over under his influence. We move from 399 BC up to the current day. Nobody has changed his input on that. He's lasted over 2,000 years. We've had changes to Aristotle. We've had putting down of Plato in some respects. But Socrates has survived. Okay. Again, the pre-Socratics study metaphysics. What is reality? You have some of the pre-Socratics mentioned in your text. I will probably bring in some others. I may post another online position of notes so that you can get the complete idea of our philosophers. I won't give you all of the pre-Socratics, there's a lot of them, but I'll give you the main ones. We start with Thales, okay, in Miletus. Thales assumes that the entire world is made out of water. Okay, they're being very naturalistic here. Water is just one substance. If I wrung out the world, what would drop out common denominator to all things? Water. Now water changes. Okay, we get solid, liquid, gas. They knew that back then. Okay. So that's the pattern of what the pre-Socratics are doing. You have Anaximander, who thought that there was, we think that he was looking at the northern lights, that there's a halo of life matter surrounding the world, and everything comes from there. So that would explain where rain comes from, or meteors, if they saw those. But also then it would it explains things that reach up to the sky as well. So we have variations on that. And then when we get up to Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, we're still arguing this. It's going to stop with Aristotle. But even though it goes up through Socrates' death, our last word on metaphysics is going to be Aristotle, and that the world is all broken down into 4 basic units, and we get both permanence and change, which sounds like a contradiction. Contradiction is one of the ways an argument can go wrong. And so we hold contradiction that these pre-Socratics, all of the Greeks, in fact, everybody in philosophy is looking for certainty. If you make a mistake in your theory, you're going to get pounded, okay? And if you take it personally or if you don't take it personally, they could care less, okay? They're looking at your theory, right? And even though the Greeks go after each other personally, to them it's a sport, okay? They think, they know what philosophy is. They know it's the value of obtaining the right information. And so they sometimes would make fun of each other. Oftentimes they make fun of each other and poke at each other. You see it in the dialogues all the time. Plato is calling his opponents idiots and jackasses and morons, literally, and dumbbells. They could care less. All right, they're going to just say the same thing back to him, but did you answer the question? Yeah. So they're always going after each other, and that's the point of philosophy. You're going to read things in this textbook that's going to sound funny and almost like a gossip column, but they're still in this pursuit of secure answers. Okay, so our pre-Socratics are going to come before Socrates. This is where we start in Western philosophy with our pre-Socratics, Thales being the father of Western philosophy, 600 BC. Okay. Now, unfortunately, it's hard to find a textbook that mentions these people, but there's going to be a group of people called the Sophists, okay, S-O-P-H-I-S-T-S, the Sophists. And Protagoras is our lead philosopher. Now, our sophist. Now, he's going to end up in the exact same situation as being that personal attack for being the lead sophist. When the sophists take over Athens, he himself is going to be exiled by his own people. So they could care less if they hurt each other. Okay, they don't care, all right? They're still, at this point now, it's becoming a power thing. We've gotten actually off of strict philosophy that the Greeks follow and that we're going to follow. And the sophists come in. Nobody knows where they come from. They're true outsiders. But how they get in is there was a free pass. Either you had money, okay, you could afford to go into a city-state and pay your way, or if you were a teacher. So being a teacher was a free pass into any city-state because you offered to trade off your knowledge for housing and food and so on. Aristotle was a traveling teacher. Confucius was a traveling teacher. It was an occupation that these people, the sophists, took advantage of and worked their way into Athens. So here we get a historical turn. Okay, it's not really a philosophical turn, but without it, you wouldn't have Socrates. Okay, so this is another part that I bring in. Unfortunately, I don't know why it's not covered very much at all in textbooks or in videos. Very hard to find. But these people changed history for us, and technically they were the first Nazis. I mean, they killed people left and right. Socrates as well. Okay, he's just the most famous one. But they put you to death. Okay, and they didn't care. So Socrates and Plato want to get rid of them. They're making Athens something that's not Athens, not respectable, and they want to get rid of them. And it takes both Socrates and Plato's adult life to get rid of them. Okay, that's about 120 years in there. Okay. And Socrates ends up dying for the cause. Plato ultimately wins. Okay, Plato ultimately gets the Sophists out, and now we know Athens the way that Plato reset it as. Okay. But when the Sophists got in there, Protagoras gets in there. If you read these dialogues in your book, you can see the names Glaucon and Cypherus and so on. All those people, anybody who's not Socrates is a Sophist. Okay? And some of them were even Plato's relatives, his brother, his cousins. But if they're the Sophists, they're the bad guy, and they want him out. So the Sophists create a lot of corruption. And when you read the allegory of the cave section is where the Sophists are. Being outside of the cave is where Plato and Socrates want to take you. They want to get you outside of the darkness of the Sophist world into the light. Okay. And so our Sophists come in, they get into the government, they get into the laws, they corrupt the state, all because the pre-Socratics weren't paying attention. They were over here looking at reality. This is something that Socrates gets angry about. While you guys were over here looking at air and water and so on, these people walked in, and you didn't do a background check. He was the first one to do a background check on educators. Okay, they were traveling teachers. Okay, but it was just a pawn to get into Athens. They really wanted Athens. And the reason why Athens was wanted was by everybody. Alexander the Great, Sparta, the church. Okay, the church comes in with letters with Paul and Peter, right? They send emissaries to Athens, okay? If they can convert Athens, many other city-states would follow. So the Sophists, if we can get a hold of them, just like Hitler with his empire, that will make our conversion of them our way much faster. We've got an empire. So they were the first Nazis. They really were. They put people to death, and they wanted an empire, and they wanted everything their way, and they could care less. They hurt people of their own, like Protagoras. Imagine being the leader of the whole thing, and then he gets exiled. So the whole thing goes crazy, and so Socrates and Plato want this to stop, and so that's how they fit in. Philosophy is going to come to a grinding halt, and they're going to come in to take care of these people. Fortunately, they do. So Socrates ends up losing his life over this, but that gets in Plato. Plato writes all of his dialogues, okay, and effectively gets the Sophists out of town. Nobody knows exactly where the Sophists go. They just kind of disband. They're never mentioned in anybody else's writing. Nobody knows where they went. I always think that they went to Rome because the Romans certainly acted the way the Sophists did, especially in the Senate. But there's no mention of their names over in Rome either. So nobody knows exactly where they went. Okay. So after Socrates' death, then we get philosophy set up as the way we teach it nowadays. Again, Plato is going to write his dialogues and set up ethics and knowledge, politics, art, all of these topics that we discuss in your text on the DVDs, and also as we'll discuss in class, are all going to be done by Plato. And like I said, some philosophers write on everything. Okay. And so Plato's going to get rid of the Sophists and try to restart Athens. He's got a lot on his plate to do. Just barely makes it by the end of his life. He just barely makes it with one of his last dialogues. And then by the time Aristotle comes in, everything has been taken care of. So philosophy is going to resume with Aristotle, and then it's going to stop. Okay, once the church officially comes in, then we're going to stop again. And Aristotle will have his own time period. We're going to take from Aristotle and bring that all forward. Okay, so that's where we'll stop at this point with this lecture. Go ahead and review the PowerPoints. They're for your pleasure to look at and your education. And welcome to the class, and then I'll see you next weekend.